Now let's take a look at some of the graphics that the system creates. And that certainly is one of the most important functions within this system that sets it apart from most of these hurricane tracking type applications you may see. We have a very detailed mapping database built into the system. So for example, here's the Gulf of Mexico. As you zoom into areas, the detail increases rather than decreases. You can actually get down to street level as you zoom in. So we're looking at downtown New Orleans, and yes, you can even go down and look at the names of the streets. Now during hurricane tracking, you really don't need to look at that level of detail, but for storm surge you do. And we'll see that a little bit later. In any case, so we have very detailed mapping. We're going to run through some of these graphics rather quickly because we don't want to make this a training module. We want this to be a quick demonstration of the capabilities of the system. We have separate training modules, about 14 hours worth, for folks who want to become very familiar with the system. Well, let's just start with this map, and we've got Ike 42, and we'll start just basically with the track of the storm. So we've got the track of the storm. We can show the watches and warnings along the coast. We can show the forecast track. In addition, we can also show the forecast track average error, and it will show both the 72 and the 120-hour forecast error. We can show that a little bit better here. Any map is pan and zoomable, so you can zoom in rather quickly to any portion of that map. Okay, so let's also now show the forecast models. Here are all the forecast models on that map. Okay, so we have a number of outputs right now, and we're not quite done yet. If we do this option, we can show the wind arrows around a storm. You can also have different views of the storm. If you don't like that view, you can also display something called wind pattern. That'll display a multi-colored, multi-leveled wind pattern of the storm. And then from here you can do some of your additional analysis that you saw earlier. So there's different looks and feels you can give it when you're displaying a storm. So let's continue down this display menu option. You can display locations. Here we've displayed the airport locations. You can certainly undo any level you'd like. Let's display the small map locations, and it shows different locations. You can highlight different cities, for example, in different colors to make it stand out. Latitude, longitude grid is you can make it look like an old tracking chart. We're going to undo that one. The wind field we've shown, wind pattern, watch and warning areas, all those items we've shown. Range rings from the base location, which is Houston here. So we're showing the distance from Houston of the storm. Some of this gets very busy, so we're going to undo as we go. Wind bands, probability analysis, most of these items generate a new tab. So for example, on the wind bands, let's take a look at the forecast wind bands. Okay, so now it's showing the wind bands for the storm. You can display the wind band legend, which will show which colors equate to what wind speeds. You may decide that you want to zoom in on an area. You can certainly do that. It'll reanalyze the wind bands. At this point, you can display your locations again if you'd like. So you can see how very easy and interactive the system is. So let's continue down the list. You have the wind probability analysis. We looked at this a little bit earlier, but there's the probability of a 64-knot wind in these different locations. Okay, one graphic we haven't looked at yet is the surge probabilities. Under display, you can say surge probability, and you pick the level that you're interested in. So let's say you want a probability of a 8-foot storm surge. It'll display those probabilities along the coastline as well as color code it. You can then zoom in closer to the area and get a view of the probability of that 8-foot storm surge. So this, along with the storm surge display program, is very valuable in determining the likelihood of you being impacted by a significant storm surge. Okay, we've reset our map a little bit. Let's keep on moving down. We don't need to cover all of these, but the next one that's fairly interesting is the forecast rainfall. You can show 24-hour periods or the total rainfall for the next 3 days. And here you can see the forecast rainfall over southeast Texas being rather large, and you can display the actual values of the rainfall forecast. The next fairly powerful feature of the system is the animation. You can animate the storm, either an entire past track, forecast track, or both. Let's go ahead and animate the forecast track. So you can see the storm animating, as well as the locations we've decided to plot along with that animation. That gives the location name and the distance from the center. If you want to get a closer in view of the storm, you can zoom in and certainly see the animation at a closer in value. The wind arrows represent the wind speed and direction at these locations. You'll notice that the wind speeds over water are much higher than they are over land, and that's something that's exclusive to the Hurrtrak system. We employ something called advanced wind estimation that takes into account surface friction upstream of your location to determine what the likely wind speed will be at your location. We'll discuss this in more detail a little bit later, but it is one of the most important functions within the Hurrtrak system that separates it from all other applications. Now when you are animating, you can single step the storm, or once you start it, this will control the speed of the animation. And again, you can zoom in as close as you'd like. So let's go ahead and zoom into the Galveston area. And you see very high level of detail of the wind speed and the wind directions as the storm approaches and moves through. In this case, this was a forecast track. Now you notice across the top, when you're doing animation, you can do a number of things. Besides changing the position of the storm, you also have the ability to print this frame of the animation. You can send the entire animation via email. You can save the animation as an animated GIF. Then you can import that into other systems such as PowerPoint. And you can also create an animated wind pattern, which is a very interesting looking tool. So you have all these functions across the top that you can do. When you send something via email, it will either use your Microsoft Outlook or allow you to use the internal email function within the Hurrtrak system. Okay, the creation of the animated wind pattern takes a little bit of time, so rather than creating that on the fly, here's an example that's on our website. And this shows Hurricane Katrina as it's moving northward. And you can see the multicolored display showing the winds at different locations. This is a very useful graphic. Okay, let's jump back to one of our tracking maps. And we do want to point out that some of the functions we just mentioned with animation are also available with your static images. Actually, there's more of them available. You can send the image via email. You just say with image or as a PDF. It'll bring up a window that will allow you to do that. In addition, you can export the image to Google Earth. You can save the image to a clipboard, file, PDF. So it's very easy to share the outputs of the Hurrtrak system with other folks in your organization. Okay, so these are a lot of the graphics within the system. There's probably even more than what we've shown you here, but in the interest of time, we've shown you the most important ones.